Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So in this video I'll be explaining you about mineral admixtures. So watch my last video where I've taught about chemical admixtures, right? So in this video let's see what are the different types of mineral admixtures, and also let's see what is the effect of mineral admixture addition individually in concrete. Okay, so before going to that, first of all, let's learn about a definition called pozzolon or pozzolanic materials. So generally, pozzolanic materials are siliceous or siliceous aluminous materials which are having or which possess very little or probably no cementitious value. They are generally in very fine form, but uh, when they are added to make concrete, so then they react with calcium hydroxide, and they generally behave like cementitious materials. So what actually we know in the hydration process of cement? Cement containing lime and other materials will react with water to start the hydration process, and later on the products of hydration are found. That's what we have studied in detail. So here, in the place of cement, we are using pozzolanic materials which have the same, almost around same composition like cement, which could be probably industrial waste or agro waste, and that will behave like a cementitious material when water is added to it. So, what are the main important properties of using a mineral admixture in concrete? Advantages will be like heat of hydration is reduced, thermal shrinkage is reduced, water tightness is increased. Means the concrete becomes more permeable against water penetration, reduces the alkali aggregate reaction. Mineral admixtures generally improve the resistance to sulfate attacks. They also improve resistance to leaching and dissolution. They improve the workability, and also they try to reduce the cost of your construction. Since you're replacing cement either partially or wholly with the industrial byproduct or agricultural byproduct, the cost is reduced. Coming to the types of mineral admixtures, we have natural and artificial. Coming to natural, we have clay and shales, opaline cherts, diatomaceous earth, volcanic tuffs, and pumicides. These are the naturally available mineral admixtures. Artificially available are fly ash, GGBS, silica fume, RHA, metakaolin, and surki. So what diagrams now right now we can see on the screen are your natural pozzolans. So you have right from the first one, whatever we have discussed just now, clay and shales, opaline cherts, diatomaceous earth, and the same order, and the last one is your pumice. Let's get into our artificial pozzolans. First one is fly ash. So fly ash is the byproduct which is coming out from a thermal power plant or a electric power plant. It's generally a residue. It is generally captured in a electric precipitator. It will be generally flying in the air with the less weight. So once the machine is cooled down, it's collected. So that ash like particles keep flying inside the electric precipitator, so they are captured, that particles, that's our fly ash, right? So fly ash is generally collected from a electrostatic precipitator. So when you burn coal for getting or for manufacturing um, electricity, we generally get fly ash as the byproduct. And this is one of the most widely used pozzolanic material all over the world. We have generally two types of fly ash. We have class F and class C. Class F fly ash is produced by burning anthracite or bituminous coal. It consists of calcium oxide of less than 5%, and class F fly ash will have only pozzolanic properties. We have class C fly ash which is obtained by burning lignite, okay, and or sub bituminous coal. This class C will have calcium oxide greater than 10%. So class C will have more calcium oxide in it, more lime percentage in it. In addition to pozzolanic properties, even class C fly ash will also possess cementitious properties. So class C fly ash can be used as a good replacement. Amount, up to how much amount we can replace cement with fly ash? Up to 35% by weight you can replace. More if you are replacing your concrete, uh, may require addition of some other materials to it. And also our IS code specifies that replacement of fly ash up to 35% is okay. If it's exceeding more, you don't get a good concrete. Okay, so results: addition of fly ash will reduce the water demand, and also it reduces the unit water content. It will reduce the shrinkage and bleeding. uh, as fly ash is not reactive, the heat of hydration will be reduced. So you can see this is how the heat of hydration got reduced. As the age increases, you can see the temperature rise. Next, when fly ash is added one to the concrete, and once the concrete becomes hardened, we call it as hardened concrete. So in case of hardened concrete, it will contribute to very less strength. That's the reason we are limiting our percentage of fly ash to 35%. More than 35%, many studies have told that the strength of the concrete is not good. Right? So it contributes to strength only up to 35%. And also, continued pozzolanic reactivity of concrete develops greater strength at later ages. So when you're using fly ash, you don't get initially high strengths, but at later ages you'll get the strength. It gives very dense texture to your concrete, thereby making your concrete more resistive against water penetration. So high volume fly ash has been used in Barker Hall project, University of California at Berkeley, for the construction of shear walls. So you can see even we have high volume fly ash concrete where we are replacing fly ash up to 45-50 percentages. But at the time you need to use some chemical admixtures to get the workability and strength. So generally you can use fly ash at many high-rise buildings, industrial structures, waterfront structures, concrete roads, roller compacted concrete dams, etc. Even in India, fly ash was used in the construction of an irrigation project in Uttar Pradesh. Next, we have silica fume. Silica fume is another industrial byproduct. It is obtained from reduction of high purity quartz with coal in an electric arc furnace in the manufacture of silicon or ferrosilicon alloys. So this silica fume is basically the byproduct coming out from ferrosilicon industry, right? So in the making of alloys, the byproduct silica fume is obtained, and it's very fine in nature. It has around 85% of silica dioxide in it, and one of the secondly, or not secondly, one of the most widely used mineral admixture again. So this is how silica fume looks like. So silica fume is also called microsilica, and it is obtained in the following forms. You have undensified form, you have densified form, you have pelletized form, means even in the form of pellets you can get, even in the form of slurry you can get, and even in the form of chemical you can get. Okay. Effect of silica fume on fresh concrete. So when you add silica fume by percentage of weight with cement into the concrete, we generally demand more water content. Silica fume, when you add, the water content should be increased by 1% for every percentage of replacement. Okay, so this silica fume will demand more water content, and it will give you a very lower slump. It gives you a very cohesive mix, very sticky mix. When silica fume is added, the concrete looks more sticky in nature, and it's very difficult to handle. So obviously we can expect a very less slump value. It helps in large reduction of bleeding, and even this helps us to carry the concrete to different places without segregation. So in that case we can use silica fume. It helps in reducing shrinkages, and also it helps, but the thing is that in the earlier stages we get more heat of hydration, and but at later on it will reduce. Then usage, you can use silica fume to replace cement to produce high strength concretes, get early strength, to control alkali aggregate reaction, and also to reduce sulfate attacks and chloride associated attacks. So coming to the effect on hardened concrete, modulus of elasticity is less, but durability is more. It is resistant against frost damage, and addition of silica fume will increase the expansion of concrete. Next we have rice cash. So it's also called as RHA. Rice cash is obtained by burning rice husk. So rice husk is the protective covering for your rice grains. So that husk is generally a waste product which will come during the milling process. So that will be generally ground burnt, and that what you get is called as rice husk ash. And this is one of the challenging material nowadays used widely to replace cement. It is more for 2 to 3 decades. You can see this RHA will be used as a mineral admixture for sure. So you can see those are the rice hulls, and yeah, that's the rice husk ash, one of the important material used to reduce the environmental pollution. Why? Because you get lot of rice husk which is obtained during the milling process. Dumping of it is really a big landfill problem, so you can burn it and use the ash. Not only in concrete, rice husk ash has various applications around. So up to 10-15% we can use. Optimal replacement is up to 10% by weight of cement, but around 20% also we can do. Research studies are going on. It improves the workability and impermeability nature of the concrete. Since RHA particles are very fine in nature, they act as filler agents in concrete, and therefore they make your concrete more impermeable. So rice husk ash generally contains high amount of silica, similar like your silica fume, around 5% of carbon and 2% of potassium oxide. So when rice husk is added to concrete, it reduces the effect of concrete towards acids, and also it improves resistance of concrete towards chloride ion penetration. As I've told, RHA acts like a filler, so less is the number of pores, so more dense is your concrete, and hence less is your permeability. Improves resistance to CO2 attack, but it also reduces micro cracking. It improves capillary suction, but the only disadvantage of using RHA is that uh, water cement ratio may get affected. Next, we have blast furnace slag or GGBS. GGBS or blast furnace slag is the same. It's obtained by quenching molten slag into water. So it's generally the byproduct coming out from a steel industry. So it's a white colored powder what you get. And when GGBS is added to fresh concrete, obviously GGBS will help in high strength contribution. Whenever you want to get a high strength concrete, some part will be even replaced by GGBS also. And even GGBS is finer in nature when compared to cement. So it reduces the unit water content necessary to obtain the same slump. If you are doing a conventional concrete and if you are using a GGBS added concrete, the water content will get reduced. But when you're using RHA, the water content will be increased. Yeah. So hydration of slag is little bit slower when compared to regular hydration of cement. It helps in reducing the bleeding. Coming to hardened concrete, it reduces heat of hydration. It helps in refinement of pore structure, as I've told you. So pore structure is refined means if all the pores are filled, the concrete is more denser. If it is more denser, it can take more strength. It reduces the permeability, yes, and it also increases the resistance to chemical attacks. Next, we have metakaolin. Metakaolin is one of the highly reactive mineral admixture. So, if people are going for making reactive powder concrete, this will be the mineral admixture obviously used, right? So, it is a reactive pozzolon, generally white or cream in color, thermally activated. If it is thermally activated, it's called thermally high reactive metakaolin. So metakaolin is obviously very reactive in nature. So metakaolin, when it is added to concrete, it increases the rate of pozzolanic activity. It reduces CaOH taken twice. That's the calcium hydroxide which we generally don't require. It gives more densified concrete. More densified concrete results in greater strength and lesser permeability, as we have discussed. So generally we use metakaolin when we want reactive concrete, and also when we want denser concrete, right? So I all hope you all understood the video. Thanks for watching.